Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. So I'm in Rikazi sitting here with Cameron Selby, and we're going to talk about some players that we just don't love their ADP. We kind of hate their ADP on best ball drafts right now. And, we create our own rankings. We have our own rankings for these guys, and they just aren't matching up in any way. They're just much, much lower where we're at with them, and people are still drafting them much higher. So,
yeah, there's certain people that we have a ton of negative correlation with our average rank compared to where we have them in our board. So we currently want to be underweight or just completely fade at their price right now. We've done over 100 drafts cumulatively together, and so we have a good idea of like 8 to 10 guys for guys we love, guys we hate, guys we want more of. And we're going to start with the pessimistic side of things.
yeah, so starting off, Mike Williams, and it has a lot to do with, of course, if it was healthy Mike Williams, number 2 in a Jets offense, and he had a healthy season the year prior, we'd be much more comfortable with his rankings where he's at. But he played 3 games last year, and he was injured the rest of the year. He's been injured multiple years. It's not his first time. But when he was playing, he had 16.7 fantasy points per game. So we do love Mike Williams as a player. It's just this is not the place to get him. It's just if you look at the rankings for DraftKings and Underdog, they both have him at wide receiver 58 and 56 respectively, and then we have him 10 picks later, or 10 receivers later, not even just picks later, 10 receivers later. And so we're just kind of off of him in that way. But hey, I can't write the narrative. That's the problem. I'm worried about injury. I'm worried that he won't come back the same. And it's not like he got injured prior to the season. It was mid-season. So it's just.
So it's a couple of things. Mainly one, Aaron Rodgers has never been one to just, we're going to have about 4 guys that are fantasy relevant throughout the year.
Right.
And also with the fact that we just think it's the Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall show. They're obviously both going in round 1 for a reason. Mike Williams right now is basically going right around pick 110, 115. He's starting to drop a little bit more on DraftKings, but we're still a little too high on it. And, 7 seasons in, he's only had 1 season of more than 900 yards. Touchdown-wise, he's only had 2 seasons of more than 5 touchdowns. Like, there's just not a ton of upside. There's a lot of injury risk. He's only been healthy really 1 full season, and he didn't even start. It was one of the earlier seasons of his career where he also had 10 touchdowns, but only 660 receiving yards. We just can't paint the narrative for it. It just feels way too Odell Beckham Jr.-ish when he first left and he went to when he came back on the ACL from Cleveland,
right.
And we're just like, we're just not on it in the 9th, 10th round. Now he's kind of fallen a little bit to the 11th, but we're just way underweight, and it really has to change for us to get both.
Yeah, very drastic difference in rankings, obviously. And there's 10 guys that we are more comfortable with than Underdog even feels. So, yeah,
he's 150th overall for respect purposes, not necessarily because he is a talented football player. But from a fantasy perspective, you can't always just draft purely talent, especially if it's not great situations. That's just gonna be upside for. And then they also drafted another receiver early, Malachi Corley.
Right.
Well, there's not a lot of paths for him to just also succeed. If he has any kind of stretch where he just kills it, it's going to be in spite of Breece Hall going down or Garrett Wilson going down. It's not going to be because Aaron Rodgers is throwing for 5,000 yards,
right?
And 3 guys are candidates for 1,000 yards.
Well, receiving. we had, and I took a stand to get some Mike Williams last year because Kellen Moore coming and being the new OC for the Chargers. I was like, they're going to push the ball down the field. Who's the guy that's going to push the ball? It's Mike Williams. When he was healthy, I was very happy, but this is a different offense. This is not his show anymore. And they have, of course, Aaron Rodgers. We haven't seen him throw over 300 yards in how long? I mean,
it's been about 2.5 years.
Yeah, so I just don't see his style of play fitting into what Mike Williams has done well in the past. And I also don't know where Mike Williams will be when he comes back. And then, a shocker, guys. Y'all are going to hate this. We love it, though. Blake Corum. We were not high on him in the pre-draft process. He is not going to get possibly any touches unless Kyron goes down, because Sean McVay will put Kyron on the field for 90% of the snaps. Like, he is not scared to have him on the field the whole game. And so in this situation, it's like, well, how do you, like, he's just a handcuff. He's just a handcuff. And we're putting him as if he's as good as Brian Robinson, a guy that last year was a top 12 running back. I can't get there.
Yeah, he's going above guys like Chase Brown, Jerome Ford,
Zeke,
and Kendre Miller. All guys who can have roles next to a receiver, a running back. Kyron Williams led the league in touches per game last year, and he was efficient in those touches. So essentially, this is going to be a 70-30 split. Blake Corum's not a pass catcher. This feels way too much like Zach Charbonnet last year. And the only reason he's in our top 50 is because we acknowledge and understand that rookie running backs are king for volume, and there's a clear path to 20 touches a game if Kyron goes down. So if he was going outside the top 150, we would have a lot more of him, because we do like Kyron Williams as a third round, running back, hero running back, whatever you want to draft him. But next, if Kyron's healthy, Blake Corum isn't going to be close to a threat for 1,000 yards or 10 touchdowns like a Zeke is. Jerome Ford was a top 20 running back when Nick Chubb went down. Nick Chubb has been a consistent RB1 when he was healthy. And obviously he won't get back to that this year, but he has RB2 upside.
Right.
By default, because he's so talented. There's way too many guys there. It's one of the most confusing things to me, how people are high on him as a football player, let alone, fantasy talent. And obviously, getting 27 touchdowns, leading the nation, that's cool. He did that by default. And guess what? There's guys like Monty Ball, if you remember, from Wisconsin, that would get 30 plus touchdowns and 2,000 yards, and they were out of the league in 2 years. So Blake Corum will be a 24-year-old rookie to start, or not, during this season. He will be a 24-year-old rookie, younger than a lot of the starting running backs in fantasy football. There's no path for him having success if Kyron is healthy.
Yeah.
And you can't just draft based on handcuff in the 11th round.
Yeah, you have to have some sort of upside. You have to have some way to actually have clear points value. Okay. I feel like all I do is harp on how I dislike Blake Corum. My problems are there is no explosiveness. Like, we can go back and forth, whatever, but if you look at the advanced stats on Blake Corum, all of his touchdowns, and if you go watch our running back video from before when we did the breakdown of the draft, you will see that we talked about it a lot. All of his touchdowns came within the 5-yard line. He never broke off. He had basically 3 times the touches that a guy like Marshawn Lloyd or Trey Benson had. And those guys had the same amount of explosive plays. Explosive plays are 15 yards down the field, 15 plus yards. He doesn't catch the ball, like you said. Of course, he was asked to run the ball a ton at Michigan. And that's why he was capable of, having the yards and stuff. But he only had 4.2 yards per carry. You want to talk about efficiency?
That's fine in the NFL. That is atrocious in college football.
You want to talk about efficiency? Well, Kyron had more than that last year in the pros against much better competition and talent. People want to compare them. Kyron showed that he is a much better running back than where he was drafted, and they still took this chance early enough on Blake Corum that it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we want to harp on him, if he went to somewhere like the Chargers or the Cowboys, who clearly needed a 1A or 1B,
we would be fine with this. We would
be fine with it, especially at this price. But because he went to somewhere where truly Kyron does it all. Like, he's a dual threat. He's a good pass blocker. He is efficient as a pass catcher. He had a game last year with 2 receiving touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns in the same game. Like, he can do it all. Blake Corum, no upside as a pass catcher. He's smaller, he's older, and I can't justify taking him this early, because a lot of the time most people are taking their RB3 here because they're going hero or zero RB. Well, that's not worth the selection or investment to me, especially at this price. When you can get somebody like Kamani Vidal, who, again, went to the Chargers, they want to give somebody the ball 300 times.
Yes.
And his competition is somebody like Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, both coming off injuries or getting close to 30 years old and have never had a full-time workload. Whereas Kyron, average leading the league in touches. Like, he has the workload. He was good in that workload. And yet, because he was a third-round pick, people are just all over it. Well, that's exactly how you can get somebody like Trey Sermon early and just have it just not work out for you.
So I just looked up, of course, just to look at the age difference between Kyron and Blake. Kyron was born August 26, 2000. Blake Corum was born November 25th, 2000. They are 3 months age difference. Kyron is 3 months older than him. Kyron has been in the league for 2 years. It's just, we are putting a lot of value in somebody that, has to produce now to be productive in his career, period. And he's competing with a guy that's the same exact age as him, and actually
He's
doesn't
just better in everything.
Yeah, and doesn't have the injury history. Like,
yeah,
Blake
he
Corum,
missed a month last year due to ankle sprain. Everybody gets ankle sprains, and you have to miss time. You can't be considered injury prone, because then you'll fade CMC, and he can, break everything last year.
Yes.
After having back-to-back years of injuries, nobody wanted to draft him anymore. He's getting older. Oh, no, he's still him.
So Blake Corum in 2022 underwent surgery for a knee injury. I can't remember.
And an ACL.
Yeah.
He tore his ACL.
It was his ACL. So, that's just add that. Like, it's like we have a guy that has not had those issues starting over him and has been productive at the NFL level, receiving and rushing the ball. What is he, a 24 touch guy? What it was last year? Sean McVay loves him, wants him on the field. And Sean McVay does not care about your fantasy team. So, like, stop thinking he does. Like, he does not. He's almost as bad as Arthur Smith, and just doesn't make sense. We're just going to ride with Kyron, and you can have your Blake Corum, whatever. So that's where we're at on that. And then the next guy, wide receiver, Rashee Rice. This is a guy that we have a lot of stuff to talk about, truly. But what really comes down to is, he could be, at the beginning of the year, he could be suspended, which is a big deal. You don't know if it's 3 games, 6 games. It could be anything. Coming back from that, of course, he'll be behind. But not even just that. My problem is, and we've talked about this on the show, is that, he's a guy that has been... He came into a team that had no pass catchers, and he just happened to be the only guy that could catch the ball. Now he's on a team with multiple pass catchers, guys that are speedsters, that all are pretty solid at not dropping the ball. And we're just going to expect him to still be, and what is it? Not 69th on DraftKings. We're at 113th with him, and I'm still uncomfortable with that. I have 0 shares of him, and I probably will not have a single share of him because he's actually going up in value. Yeah, it's amazing.
That's the crazy thing, is he's actually risen around since we put out our first rankings, or at least put up together our list 2 weeks ago, and then we updated it on Wednesday, because usually in redraft they're kind of slower at this point, and there's not as big difference. And he just rose like 9-10 spots, and it's just like, guys, he's still getting suspended.
He's going to get suspended, guys.
Like, I think if there was 0 suspension on the table and we were just drafting, it's a 3-headed monster of Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown, and Rashee Rice.
4.
He's still going uncomfortable.
Yeah, Travis Kelce's there too, guys. Like,
yeah,
we're just, we have, all of a sudden we have actual pass catchers, and Rashee Rice was the best of basically the garbage last year. They still won a Super Bowl. Don't get me wrong, but Mecole Hardman is the touchdown in the Super Bowl. It's not Rashee Rice. You know what I mean? Like, I just have a hard time with this. He didn't even get 1,000 yards last year. Things like that. They just
justifying somebody who could be suspended half the season or even a good portion of the season to be a 6th-round pick is just ludicrous to me.
And we are not touching it. He might be my least favorite on this list, and that's saying a lot, but I digress. And then jump into the next guy. We have Raheem Mostert. I don't understand how he was so productive last year, but it of course comes from 21 touchdowns. That's where you get the fantasy production. But at the same time, like he hasn't had 21 touchdowns in his whole career total until this last year. He eclipsed that by doing it in 1 year. The 2-headed monster became a 3-headed monster in Miami. We expect Achane to take a step as a sophomore, and that's why he's going so high, getting more touches and things like that. Of course, you don't expect two guys to go 40 points in the same game. That isn't really heard of, but it happened in the Miami team. But we're probably 15 spots lower on him than everybody else right now. So,
yeah, I mean, to us, it's just hard to. He just feels way too much like the Jamal Williams coming off of leading the league in rushing touchdowns and then going to New Orleans with and he was in a better. You could paint the picture because Alvin Kamara dealt with some injuries, and then we knew he was going to get suspended.
right.
We thought 6 games. He got reduced down to 3, and he was going in the 11th, 12th round. Well, Raheem Mostert is now going in the 7th round, and his projected starter or primary competition, is going in the 2nd round. So
Right.
it's not like a Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris, where they're both going at the same spot. People are just saying, I have this one or I like this one more. They're 5-round difference. So the public's saying Achane's going to be the guy. And yet you still have Raheem Mostert. I mean, to me, it's just kind of hard to justify that. It feels like a worse version of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. And David Montgomery is going, in the first 7 rounds. And that feels uncomfortable. And we know he's going to have like 15 touchdown upside this year.
Right.
And nearly 1,000 yards rushing. And yet Raheem Mostert, we don't have that same guarantee. And yet he's going just as high.
Yeah, and then of course, don't forget, like they draft Jaylen Wright, another speedster, another guy that could just take touches. Excuse me. Another guy that just could take touches and be. I don't know if it's considered productive, but if he gets say 8 touches a game, like those are backup touches normally, and those are going to guys like Raheem Mostert, and that's just he's not getting them. So that hurts him value wise also to me. But yeah, so Raheem Mostert, we're not out on. He just has to fall to us, basically.
His ADP is going a little too high for our liking.
Right.
But we're fine with him, just not in the 7th round when we're looking for our second running back.
Exactly. And then a guy that we actually really liked coming out, we really like as a player, but Lad McConkey in the Chargers offense, it's just so muddy right now. You don't know who's going to be the number 1 there, right? It could be Josh Palmer, who is going, 40 picks later. It could be Quentin Johnston, who's going 70 picks later. So going Lad McConkey, who has never proven to be we love Lad McConkey, but we liked him as a number 2 option on a team. That's just how it is, because he's not necessarily the true number 1. He plays in the slot a lot. He's that more kind of that type of comfortable guy. He'll get you first downs on 3rd down and that kind of guy. But I'm a little bit less comfortable when you say, okay, he's going to go to the Chargers and they want to run the ball 45 times a game. Oh, okay. Well, now what? Because Lad won't thrive in that. He might be the guy that gets you first downs, but say he goes 6 for 60, you're probably not really happy with that at 73-69 player on the board.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those similar to Adonai Mitchell. We love them as players, as talent, but it's a little bit of a way too high in talent, and we still have to wait and see until that production comes, because we can talk about Puka Nacua again, 5th round rookie last year that set rookie records and obviously won people millions of dollars because of his performance. Well, he was productive in college.
Right.
He was very productive in college. Lad McConkey, he was in a run-based offense And his best receiving yard season was his sophomore year where he played all 15 games, 762 yards.
Right.
And it's just like, that's not a 69th pick upside.
No.
And on top of that, he goes to a situation. It's different if you go to a high volume passing offense that you're going to walk into and possibly get 120 targets. Well, he's going into an offense that Jim Harbaugh wants to be one of the lowest passing totals or passing attempts per game. He wants to run the ball, milk the clock. He doesn't want to lead the league in plays or time of possession is what he wants to do, and that's not going to take place by 2-minute offense in the first quarter.
Right.
And I just don't see the path for him to become a top 70 player right now.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, we as fantasy owners in best ball want to push up rookies right now because rookie wide receivers have been productive. You had the Pukas. You had, even before that, there's been a slew of rookie receivers that have been good. But you have to think about it this way. There's only one Puka, and there's 20 receivers in that class last year. There's a ton in this class that are really good at football. Don't get me wrong. But not all of them can pan out in their rookie season. You're going to have to wait on some of them. And we right now have a ton of them between 60 and 85. So just be cautious, guys. And then we'll jump over to a guy that I know everybody's going to get in the comments for and be mad about because we just aren't ready to be like, yes, Anthony Richardson has arrived. He's that guy. When he played, he was good. But I don't know if anybody watched his Florida film, but he was never a prolific passer. He's a big guy, big arm type of guy. He was solid this last year, but he doesn't know how to protect himself. He gets injured because of that. And we have seen him in 4 games. 2 he actually finished, I believe, and then 2 he got hurt in and had to come out of. I'm just not ready. I thought the comparison that you made the other day was pretty good. It was to Trey Lance. It's the same thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Trey Lance, I liked a lot. Injured first year. And then tore his ACL when he got his actual opportunity. And then lost the job to Brock Purdy. Well, after all of that, like he had to get sent to the Cowboys and be the backup. Well, I don't see why Anthony Richardson couldn't have that same path if something happened to him this year and got injured. It's too early for me to be comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, to us, you look at his box score and stats, it's Tim Tebow. And people want to crap on Tim Tebow for not being a capable NFL quarterback and franchise guy. Fantasy-wise, I don't know. I don't remember how relevant he was compared to the rest of the players, but I know the ceiling of quarterbacks was way lower.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at overall fantasy totals, and I think there's been 6 or 7 400-point seasons ever by quarterbacks. And most of them have happened in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Most of them were Josh Allen.
That's what I was going to say. That's the guy that got them all.
Yeah, he's had 400 points in 3 straight years. And people are saying Anthony Richardson has QB1 upside. So you're saying that he's got 400-point upside? You can miss me with that. I can acknowledge he will flirt with 10 rushing touchdowns, and maybe he can be a 1,000-yard threat on the ground. Sure. But he is going to have like 20 passing attempts a game, complete maybe half. That's why we hate stacking with Michael Pittman, just because all of his production came with Gardner Minshew.
Right.
He had 1 awful game and 1 good game. Not great game, good game with Anthony Richardson as a quarterback. And it doesn't make sense. Other than that, you got Josh Downs, A.D. Mitchell, Jelani Woods, guys that are just like, I can't get behind stacking. And we want to stack as much as we can in these best ball drafts, especially. And really, I just can't get behind a top 5 quarterback grade or ranking on Richardson when I can double stack Houston. I can double stack Baltimore.
Cincinnati.
I can double stack Cincinnati. I can double stack it Arizona, Dallas.
Right.
All these teams that are going in that same range, and it's just like I don't want anything to do with that.
Well, the other problem is if you look at his rushing upside, he loses rushing upside now that JT's back. Like, he didn't have Jonathan Taylor for those
Yeah.
games early in the year. Well, JT, when they're on the goal line, they're not going to let him run because he's been injured.
Yeah.
They're going to say, "Here, Jonathan Taylor, you're one of the best running backs in football. Why don't you score the touchdown real quick, and then we'll keep our quarterback safe because he doesn't know how to protect himself." And so you lose out on that rushing upside. You want to talk about why he had 18.4 fantasy points per game? Well, 24 of them came from just rushing touchdowns alone. He's never been prolific at passing. And if he loses his rushing upside because they have to protect him because he doesn't know how to protect himself, it's a bust, an immediate bust to me. Like, his rushing upside was what kept him alive. Justin Fields, what kept him alive. He had 100 passing yards. He had 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. That's what in the Justin Fields world. That's the same thing I see with Anthony Richardson. He could have 18 passing attempts, but if he has 2 rushing touchdowns, no one cares, right?
Yeah.
Well, he's going to lose all that. It's all going to be gone because JT's back and they don't want him hurt. And I just can't get behind it, man. It's crazy high. All right, let's go to the next guy. Oh, yes. All right.
So, yeah, Tank Dell. This is one that essentially we're taking a stand on. We understand the reason behind it. Obviously, Tank Dell and Nico, when they played together last year, Tank Dell outperformed Nico from a points per game perspective. He had the over-the-top game, and then Nico really didn't start breaking out until Tank Dell went down.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, you have a target hog that they just traded for and a 300 touch running back that you just essentially signed/traded for. One of these receivers is going to be a massive bust based on their ADP because all 3 are going in the first 3 rounds at this point. Tank Dell, I've even seen shares of him in the late second.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And again, if that is your answer and you're standing on that, then that means that Nico is going to be a failure as a second round ADP, or Stephon Diggs is going to be a failure as a third round ADP. But you don't trade a receiver for a second round pick to be your wide receiver 3 on the team. You don't sign Joe Mixon to just give the ball 200 times in the year. It's to do volume and get you throughout the season. Both of those guys are older. They're past their primes at this point. But it's going to eat into some people's workloads. And Tank Dell's never been one to just be like, I'm going to be a 10 touchdown threat. He had a fantastic stretch last year. But because he didn't have any down games pretty much, that's why he's going this high. Because you didn't see the floor with him. The floor is coming, and it's not going to be too healthy for somebody that you got to have a third round pick on.
Yeah, you improve your offense. And big changes, big changes. I think Noah Brown was their number 3 last year, basically. Well, now Stephon Diggs steps in. That is a massive difference. Devin Singletary is your starting running back. Well, now you have Joe Mixon.
And if you want to just compare, right, because Noah Brown, people say are no good, right? Noah Brown had a couple games where he had 6 for 115 and a touchdown, or 6 for 178, I think, and 2 touchdowns. He had massive games, and we think he's no good. So just because Tank Dell was productive doesn't mean that he's an elite player enough to go in the top 40 of a draft.
That's where
John Mechie was a second-round pick a couple years ago. We haven't seen the boom because he missed 1 year with leukemia. He came back, and then it was him versus Tank Dell. Tank Dell made the most of his opportunity.
Right.
Can't blame him for that. But he's
still
a talented player. And there was a viral video that took place of Tank Dell, catching a pass. And the thing that didn't go viral wasn't Tank Dell, making the move on the corner. It was John Mechie's route and how he just spun his DB around.
Yeah.
And that's a former top 10 pick cornerback that he just messed around with. I think it was Derek Singletary.
Yeah, Derek Stingley, yeah.
Or Derek Stingley, yeah.
Yeah.
Why did I say Singletary?
Because I said Devin.
So, okay, yeah.
I messed you up.
So, yeah, essentially, he was productive. He had a lot of boom. There is upside, there is no doubt. But I just think that there's a combination of things that are just not working in his favor, and that's why we're taking the stand that we are.
Well, I'll also say, maybe because we just talked about how Noah Brown broke out and did really well in certain games. Tank Dell did really well.
Dalton Schultz had a couple of games where he had 10 targets.
Yeah, Nico Collins did really well. Maybe, CJ Stroud's just really good at football. Maybe that's an option too. And he can support 3 guys. I just don't know yet. And I think my least favorite of the 3 guys is Tank Dell. Not in I love Tank Dell. Tank Dell is an awesome football player. He helped me make it to the playoffs in a lot of my best ball last year. Because he was one of my latest picks. But at the same time, he's what, a fourth round draft pick out of his class, third round draft pick, and then you've got Nico Collins, who, to me personally, I don't know that he's good at football yet. Like I know
had some bad first 2 years.
And he, yeah, exactly. Like, is he elite? Well, we want to say he's elite. He's a top 20 pick, Stephon Diggs coming in. He is the only one that I'm like, okay, he's had runs of elite seasons for a long time. Been one of the top 5 receivers in the league for multiple years. When he comes, someone has to take a step back. And I don't think it's Stephon Diggs, the guy that, is, ahead in that way.
150 targets
exactly
this season.
So that's why we're lower on Take Dell. At 67th, I mean, you have, if we made the rankings, 67th, you'd put 3 guys basically in the wide receiver 3 conversation. That's still really good. We're not hating on him. It's just, he's just not as high as he is in other rankings in best ball. So that's all. And then jump into, here we go. So this one also, I think, will probably, annoy some people. I've seen this guy, Derrick Henry, go, at the 15. He's been picked 15 before in drafts.
He's even higher in redraft right now.
Yeah, and it's like, I get it if he was 26 years old and hadn't had any injuries and didn't look like he finally put some tread on the tires, it takes, you know what I mean? But he's old, guys. He's 30, right? He's about to be 30. And so running back 8, running back 9, I get what offense he's playing in, guys. I get it. But he has no passing upside, no receiving upside, which he's never had. He's always made it up with volume and long runs. Well, now he's tread on the tires. He doesn't run as long, and he's injured. He's been injured. So that is so high. Ranked 22 overall in both sites. And we're at 55, and I think that's reasonable behind younger, better athletic running backs.
I just don't see a ton of, like, basically when you're painting pictures of like projected stat lines and stuff, I don't see him threatening with 20 touchdowns and 1,500 yards. I think it's one or the other. He's going to have like 1,500 yards and like not as many scores as you'd like, or he's going to have like 15 plus touchdowns and like 800 yards rushing and no passing upside. He's not a great pass blocker, and we saw routinely when Tennessee was trailing, he was off the field.
Yeah.
So just because he's him doesn't mean he's always on the field. And if he succeeds, it's going to be at the detriment of Lamar Jackson, who's just coming off his MVP season. So if you think that they're going to succeed more by taking the ball out of Lamar's hands, I don't know what to tell you. Like, this just feels way too much an on paper, like, hype train.
I love his name. It sounds great. Derrick Henry for Baltimore sounds great.
Derrick Henry in a Lamar Jackson backfield is just sounds like it'll put coaches' nightmares on. He's a much better football player than he is a fantasy player at this point, and we're just not going to invest in him because last year his most relevant games were 2 touchdown games. But even games against teams like Carolina, who just were, allowing so many touchdowns and production of running backs through the middle part of the season, his reason he went for, his fantasy points because he scored 3 times in that game. But he averaged 3 yards a carry. So he's not the player he once was, and he will still have those 150-yard games with maybe a touchdown or 2. But it's going to come more far and few in between, and we just don't see, especially with the passing upside. If you're talking PPR leagues, we don't see him compared to other running backs like Kyron and Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs that are behind him. He's not going to rival that production.
Yeah, and also, had one of the least efficient years he's ever had this last year. Of course, the offensive line wasn't as good. Let's just put that out there. I know that Tennessee was not as good offensive line, but
Baltimore's got worse.
Yeah, they did. They're not as good as they were either. And so we'll see what happens. He had 12 touchdowns last year. I see regression, negative regression. And if he gets 1,000 rushing yards, that's a good year.
To us, he's a very safe RB2.
Yeah.
He's going as a mid RB1. That's plain and simple. We don't think that he will be a complete bust, But remember how upset people were when Tony Pollard was going as RB8, RB9 last year, and he finished as RB18. If you draft him in the second round, Tony Pollard last year, you probably didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
Derrick Henry is going in the second round. And I will just plant my flag that it's going to be a really uphill battle if you got to go Derrick Henry with the second and your RB1 and then just go everywhere else.
Right. And then the next guy we're going to talk about, Malik Nabers, another rookie. It sounds like we don't like the rookies right now, but that's not true necessarily. The reason we don't necessarily want to get on the Malik Nabers hype train, and it's something we actually said, in March maybe, is the fact that whoever goes to the Giants, we probably don't want very many shares of, because of the fact that they're not going to score very many points. We need touchdowns. Touchdowns are important. And Malik Nabers, I'm having a hard time seeing the Giants score over 14 points a game. So,
yeah, I mean, I just don't see him moving the ball. He will be a talented football player. He'll have several highlight plays.
Right.
It'll be exciting. But when you're going in the second round or third round, you need to be 10 touchdown upside or 1,500 yard upside. And he does not have that whatsoever. I think a reasonable expectation of him is like 5 touchdowns, 1,000 yards.
Yeah, I think it's solid.
It's unfortunate because he's much more talented than that. But that's just the opportunity that he's in. He's either getting thrown to by Drew Lock or Daniel Jones.
Yeah, Danny Dimes.
Not high volume passers. Brian Daboll, if they have a slow start again, he could be the first coach to be fired. And then who knows? It could just unfold and spiral out. I just think with like Roma Dunze, right? Him and Malik Nabers. Obviously, we think that it was a trio of receivers between Harrison, Jr., Odunze, Nabers as prospects, right? Well, if Odunze went to the Giants, I can't see him being this high.
No.
I wouldn't see him in the top 50, I don't think. But he's really close to
ability-wise
to Nabers. And then if Nabers went to Chicago instead and he's next to Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, he's not going this high either. So it's just, why is there such a big discrepancy of just thinking that he's just going to instantly produce to a wide receiver 1 level or a high-end wide receiver 2 level? And I'm just not there with him right now.
Yeah. And I mean, we see him about eight receiver difference. I mean, but 20 pick difference is a lot.
He's one of the few that he's actually in a different tier.
Yeah.
Some of the tiers, like tier 4 and tier 5 of wide receivers is just massive, like 12 to 15 guys for both tiers, right? Well, a lot of people have him as like a tier 3, tier 4 wide receiver, and we actually have him in the tier below. He's at the top of that tier, but we just don't see much of a difference between him and like a Deontay Johnson, who's also in a bad offense, but could get 140 targets and 6 catches a game, and we can paint a path. With Malik Nabers, he could go 4 for 70 and just get you 11 points, and you're just not happy about that with the 3rd round pick.
Yeah, exactly. So another receiver that we're not as high on, and we went in order by ADP, of course, and so this just keeps getting higher, and when it gets higher, there's way more risk. It creates so much more risk. Jaylen Waddle. Of course, he's in the two-headed monster with Tyreek. Played 14 games last year, 14.2 average fantasy points per game. Not good enough for the 21st overall player. That's first. Tua, of course, will stand back there and throw for 400 yards. That happens. But Jaylen Waddle is not, like, there's so many mouths in that offense right now. HN, Mostert, Hill, just you can get all these names out. And Jaylen Waddle's not the touchdown guy. That's the one of my biggest problems. He had 4 touchdowns last year. He's never been a touchdown guy. He'll have 1,000 yards. That's no problem. Every year, I think he'll probably have 1,000 yards. But being 21st overall, you need some touchdowns.
I mean, with a wide receiver 2, getting 7-8 touchdowns in his first 2 seasons is pretty solid. Like, we can't just discount that.
Right.
But really,
now
the thing is, last year we were actually high and we took some ownership. He was going at the same ADP at 21, 22 at the 2-3 turn, and we had some shares of him. And we were like, if Tua is healthy, he will lead the league in passing yards. And if he will, by default, we have seen multiple wide receiver ones from the same team before because of high volume passing offense. Well, he led the league in passing, and he still just had a down year. Now, a lot of that was because Tyreek Hill is just, getting all the important touches, and Tyreek Hill is another year older. If he goes down, Jaylen Waddle every week will be a top 8 wide receiver,
Right.
and we will get a ton of him. But we're just not going to bank on, one of the best wide receivers in football getting hurt.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't really have an injury history. If that happens, cool. But, having your second round pick, his upside only being unlocked if the other guy goes down, it's just too early to start painting those narratives. Like that is like a wide receiver 3 or 4, where like Brian Thomas, if Kurt goes down or Ingram goes down, then he can consistently get those 9. Well, that's wide receiver 45, and
Right.
he's going in the 8th round now,
Mhm.
7th round. Waddle, 2nd round, 3rd round. He's at ideally, if you're taking him, he's your wide receiver 2 on your team. Because if it's wide receiver 1, that's to me a terrible strategy.
It's a little scary.
Yeah, it's a little scary. We will have a couple sprinkles, but it's he's just rising a little too much for us right now.
Yeah, and he's with him, he
now just to cut you off real quick.
No,
in redraft, he's actually going in the 4th round.
Yes.
So
yes, that makes it
much
okay.
more reasonable when he's going 20 picks later. We have him 41st overall, which is middle 4th round. So that's exactly where he's going on ESPN, and I think Yahoo's very similar. That's completely reasonable. That's completely fine. And if best ball was going that same way, we would have a lot more than we did right now. But we really have done over 100 cumulative drafts together, and I have 1 share, and I don't think you have any.
No, not right now.
If you do, it was accidental or by default, and so that's less than 2% of our
right.
drafts we've done.
I would start getting him if he was like the 3-4 turn.
Exactly.
But that hasn't happened, and it won't happen. He actually went up ADP wise, so I don't see that happening.
At this point, ADPs have kind of maneuvered around, and this is with no news going down, unless there's news of he has a nagging injury. That's when he'll start dropping a little bit. But we've said before, Cooper Kupp having a hamstring nagging injury and his ADP not dropping enough last year, and we were off him. But it's just like, just because somebody falls and you like him as a talent, like if Cooper Kupp ended up falling to like the 15th, 16th overall pick last year, I still wouldn't have wanted him.
Right.
So if Jaylen Waddle say he is, sitting out of practice because of a hamstring injury or a tweaked knee or something like that, and he's out for like 3-4 weeks, but he's not missing any game time, and his ADP falls a half a round or a round, that doesn't mean, oh yeah, I'm gonna just get all my shares now, because it's just like a lot of times, more often than not, it's still not going to work out for you.
Right, exactly. So that actually is the end of our list. Got through 10 guys, and we don't love being pessimist and hating on players. Like, it's not that so much. It's just based on where their value is and where they're at. We don't necessarily agree with it, and we're not getting these guys, and we're trying to help you all decide who to get and who to be in the tiers on and stuff like that.
The biggest thing is most of these guys are not somebody we're completely out on. Like Corum, different story. We were completely out on him based on where he's going, but it's mainly due to the draft capital you have to invest, more so than just the talent itself or situation or what have you, because a lot of these guys in good offenses and good spots, but you got to just make stands on people, and these are guys we're taking stands on. 10 guys. We'll do an updated list in about a month or so once we still have like new news.
Yeah, ADPs have adjusted,
and ADPs are starting to adjust. We'll some of those guys might be on the list again, but then there will be others. There will be some that we like right now, and if there's just like
they shoot
for
up.
example, Jaleel McLaughlin, right? He was the one that was like, oh, we could see him getting first team touches with Denver, and now he's a 13th rounder. If Audric Estime was the name that was doing that, we wouldn't have 47% of him in our drafts right now.
Right.
But he's going in the 20th round, so we're just clicking the hell out of him right now. But if he rises after he gets back and everybody's like, oh, he could lead the team in touches this year, just paying a hypothetical, he will rise as a result. And once he gets into the first 16 rounds, we're probably going to be like, we have enough.
Yeah, one beat reporter says the wrong thing, and everybody jumps on it, and we just like you can't listen to everything that everybody's saying. Basically, is what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
One person says, "Oh, this guy's getting first team reps, still a McLaughlin kind of guy." One guy makes a one-handed catch. It's like those guys get shot up.
Another
boards.
thing. So Jamar Chase's rookie season where he broke records and stuff
absolutely.
like that. He had drop issues in preseason, remember?
I do.
And so obviously rookies weren't getting drafted that high. He was going in the 7th round as like a wide receiver 4, right? Those drop issues happened and he dropped a little bit. And guess what? He had no drop issues and was so there's going to be, this higher because of players like him, Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., Keon Coleman, all those rookie Roma Dunze. There's going to be one of those guys that's having a strong camp.
Right.
That's going to just rise up. Or there's going to be one that's just like, man, he's not getting the offense. And then he's going to fall back. And so it's not always an end all be all when you're doing speculative reports like that. Mainly the ones that really matter is volume reports when you have a crowded backfield and you're like, oh, well, Kamani Vidal is getting all the first team reps, so don't draft Gus Edwards.
Right.
Or, oh, Cooper Kupp, hamstring injury, no timetable. He may be ready week 1, and his ADP is not dropping.
Yeah. That every year I was going to say Darren Waller, huge camp. Remember last year, huge camp went into the 40s.
Yep.
And we wanted nothing to do with it, and we were right. Sometimes you have to take stands on guys like that are rising draft boards, especially if you didn't get any of them prior at their current or old ADP, and you're like, well, I'm not going to do it now. Like, there's no point because I don't believe that this guy is worth this even higher pick. So just be cognizant of it. I mean, it happens all the time. We're going to get reports every day when training camp comes out, and you're going to have to adjust your ownership in ways that you probably weren't ready for. But we appreciate y'all coming and hanging out with us. That was our most hated ADPs at the moment. As Cam said, they might change, they might not. But we will continue to talk about all of this stuff throughout the summer. So don't y'all worry, it'll happen. And we appreciate y'all. Go like, comment, subscribe. Go check out our socials. We've been doing a lot more on those. So go get in those comments also.
Yeah, and even though we were a little pessimistic on this video, there's going to be 10 ADPs we love. We'll be shooting that and releasing that very soon. We got guys that we probably aren't getting enough of that we need to like. There's different players for every situation, and different players to talk about. And we've done so many drafts that we just have a really good sample size. So we wanted to kind of categorize and talk about a little bit of it, especially if you've been tuning into our live streams that we've been doing. We're doing one every week for the rest of the summer, and then every Sunday morning building lineups. That's what we're going to be doing. Coming out with several videos. We'll be doing some prediction videos, get away, take a break from some fantasy football for a little bit, and do some predictions and records and all that stuff as well. Power rankings, that was our biggest video so far, and there's probably a reason behind it because everybody wants to know where everybody stands.
Right.
It's always an important thing. So we'll try to be as versatile as we can be. But the biggest thing that's not going to change is we're going to be putting out nonstop content as long as we can and as much as we can. Keep on growing this community like we have been. And we just want y'all to be a part of it.
Yeah, so we really appreciate y'all being here with us and hanging out, and we'll see y'all next time.